All right, so what we're going to do tonight is it's going to be a little bit different format than how Levi presented, just because my style is a little bit different. So what we're going to do is that number, you can text any question you have. It's not going to go to like my cell phone or anything like that. It's a Google number, just in case you're wondering, and it's going to be where we collect your questions. So as you're sitting there tonight, I'm going to present for a little bit, kind of 4 sections, very similar to how Levi broke it down in 4 different areas. But I'm going to present for a little bit. But if you have a question, text that question to that number anytime as we go through tonight. So if it's about the resurrection, if it's something that you wanted answered last week and you forgot, or it's just a question you came in here with, text it. We may not get to it tonight, but we will try to get to it in some way, shape, or form, whether it's on Facebook, on a podcast, something, okay? Or Jeff may deal with it next week if it pertains to his. What we want to try to do in this whole apologetics series is to equip you guys to have answers, a response to why you believe what you believe. And this, I remember being in college, and I got to take apologetics, different levels of apologetics over and over, and I loved them because I had all these tough questions, and I grew up around the church, but I didn't grow up like in the church. And so I came to faith whenever I was between my 8th grade and freshman year, and I had a bunch of questions on what it meant to be a follower of Jesus and why. Ultimately, I'll just tell you, I didn't come to faith because of, factual, historical data points, throughout history and all these things. I came through a relationship, and I saw what God had done in other people's lives, and it was through the process of following Jesus that I saw my life transformed, but then also wanting foundations for why I believed what I believed. And so I think it's very important to understand that what we're talking about tonight, we're hitting like the 10,000 foot view of apologetics. You can get into like nitty gritty, crazy stuff, right? There's been hundreds of books written all over the place. But we want to equip you with some of the big ones. To start off with, I want to make a recommendation though. If you want to go deeper, okay? Because like I said, we're not diving into, PhD level apologetics tonight, okay? Timothy Keller, The Reason for God, okay? Belief in an Age of Skepticism. This is a really good book. It explains a wide variety of different things and gives you a good base to work from. This is in our library, so you can check this out for free if you want to read it. And then another one that I really have enjoyed over the years is David Limbaugh. Okay, Jesus on Trial. A lawyer affirms the truth of the gospel. Okay, and so this is kind of a fun book. It has a lot of good stuff in it, but it's basically putting Jesus on trial, the whole gospel narrative, and why he comes to a conclusion of believing himself. So these are really good resources if you want to go a little bit further. Obviously, there's way more out there, but this is a good place to start, and they can be found in our library. All right, you guys ready to jump in? Here we go. So let me ask you this. What tool do we need if we're going to mow my yard? You probably don't want to mow grass with a pocket knife, right? Could you mow grass with a pocket knife? Yes. You probably don't want to use a weed eater for my yard, right? Now, in Costa Rica, where we go a lot, you see these guys out with weed eaters, and that's how they mow their grass. It's a good idea for them because everything's a mountain, right? Bad idea for my yard. Would you want to use a push mower for my yard? Some of you saying no. Some of you are like, well, maybe, because you don't know my yard, right? So would you want to use like a riding mower? Would that be a good option? You have no clue, do you? Maybe a zero turn, right? Big old 60-inch or 72-inch diesel. Would that be a good option? Maybe, if you know how big my yard is. Maybe not. What if I have like 4 feet of yard? I might live in an apartment, right? You don't know that. How about like one of them batwing mowers, that the state uses? Would that be a good option to mow my yard with? At this point, you have no clue, do you? Okay, so here's my point. The right tool for the right job is very important, okay? And so when we're looking at the information tonight, tools are going to be very, very important. So where do we start from? All this stuff, tools is where we start from. And I have this, so I have notes and I have this, and I may get confused. I may just go to my notes. Levi did a wonderful job making me a PowerPoint off my notes. So, yes, give credit to Levi because he loves PowerPoint. Okay, so everyone can have their own opinion or belief, but you are not entitled to your own truth, okay? I'm going to come back to that. Everyone's entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own truth. And we live in an age where truth seems to be very difficult to discern, right? We live in an age where people say, your truth is your truth, and, my truth, my truth. Well, that's not true, okay? There is certain facts that we can look at and be certain of. And so opinions are very different than truth. And so we're going to try to use the right tools to get to the right conclusion on all of this. And let me just tell you this. I am not a professional, I don't have a degree in apologetics, and so I'm just trying to give you a perspective here from a biblical-based idea and how I came to be about a Christian, and hopefully it'll help you, okay? So tools. Here's the tools we have. We have science. We have philosophy. We have archaeology, and we have history. All of those are tools that we can use to help discover truth. But it depends on what we're looking for in order for us to pick the right tool. So a lot of times whenever you hear the creation account, they will pick science, right? Science is the primary driver behind the creation event. So you can use science to apply to many fields, but if we're looking at the resurrection, is science the best tool for us to use to determine if the resurrection is true or not? Probably not. Because they didn't do like biopsies, and they didn't do, different things like that are recorded for us to know. Okay? So science, not really the best option here to discover if the resurrection is right. Philosophy, probably not, right? There's a lot of philosophical things, truths that come out of practice. That's kind of the philosophy there, is observations and practices, best practices, not really the best for us, okay? And then we look at archaeology. That one gets a little more interesting. Why? Anyone been to Israel? Okay, if you've been to Israel, there's some archaeological finds that point really heavily to New Testament writings, to Old Testament writings, to Jesus, the birthplace of Jesus. There's a lot of archaeological things that point towards the truth that we have recorded. So archaeology could be a pretty good tool. Now this is where knowing what you're exactly looking for comes in to practice here, okay? If you're going to mow my yard, I'll just tell you, like a 60-inch zero turn is perfect, okay? The batwing mower, too big. Push mower, going to take you forever, okay? I have like 1.5 acres to mow, and it's wide open, flat, with no trees, okay? So a zero turn is like perfect for the job. So if we're going to look at the resurrection of Jesus, we have the most historical evidence at our disposal to determine if this is true or not. And so we're going to take a historical approach. Now, Levi spent a lot of time last week setting this all up for me. There's not very many people, in fact, almost zero, that would argue that the New Testament does not have credibility. The issue becomes the claims of Jesus. The books that are written in the New Testament, people pretty much universally agree, yes, they were written early and they were written about Jesus. So our historical truths that we're going to work on and foundations that we're going to look at, there's a few things that we need to just know. There were eyewitnesses to the accounts that could have been disputed, but they weren't. Okay? So when we talk about the resurrection of Jesus, we actually have a lot of accounts in the New Testament and from outside writings that attest to the fact that Jesus was crucified and that he was risen from the grave. Okay? That he was gone. He was gone from the grave. There was an empty tomb. There's lots of theories behind that, but we'll get into that later. So there's eyewitness accounts. The New Testament writings were completed by 100 AD. So last week we were talking about early writings. Remember Jesus, early, mid-30s, whenever the crucifixion happened, ministry and crucifixion. And we have the New Testament pretty much written by the end of the first century there, by 100 AD. And so if there was eyewitnesses accounts that disputed this thing, they could have easily been gone to and been like, nah, that didn't happen. This is what really happened. But the fact that there's not is very interesting, okay? So we look at the four Gospels when they were written. We see Matthew AD 90, Mark 66 to 70, Luke 85, 90. By the way, we don't have the exact ones. In case you weren't here last week, we don't have like the original, penned by Luke. So we have copies, and we can see that those copies are early, and we have an estimate of when they're written because of the historical aspects that are recorded within those. Okay? Because you got to remember, you have Judaism going on, you have the Roman Empire going on, and then you have this Christian movement going on. So you kind of have some different worlds colliding there, and you can line these things up to get a timeline of when all this happened. John 90 to 110. Okay? So they're written during the lifetime of people who experienced, knew, heard, and lived with Jesus. These people knew about the stuff that was going on in Jerusalem. If you remember the Passover feast, there'd be over 1 million people come into Jerusalem. So we're not talking about a little isolated event out in the middle of nowhere, like some church gathering down in Horde, okay? And there's 7 people there, and they say, oh, this dude, Jesus, resurrected from the grave down here at Horde, and there were 7 people. We're talking about 1 million plus people, all right, in Jerusalem, in and around this, that would have been very familiar with what's going on, okay? And then the day of Pentecost and all that stuff, you're not talking about an isolated event. That's what my point is this. There's lots of eyewitnesses that would attest to these things. There we go. So, faith is a part of this equation, okay? Faith is a part of any equation that you set your beliefs upon. And faith equals believing and acting upon the criteria and substance that is given. So faith determines our function. And what I mean by this is if you believe in creation, you have faith that something came from nothing. Because that is the actual theory, that something came from nothing. It's kind of a joke around the scientific community, but it's actually their hypothesis, that something came from nothing. So that would be, you are putting your faith into science based upon that conclusion. I choose to put my faith in the historical accuracy of the Bible. I choose to put my faith in the Holy Spirit working and guiding my life. Now, for a non-believer or someone who's not been around church, Holy Spirit doesn't really necessarily play a big part in that. But we're going to show that the Bible is reliable, and there are historical things about it that point us to the right direction. Okay? So we have these eyewitness accounts. We have 5,000 plus copies that Levi talked about last week of the New Testament. Okay? So we're confident in the context. We're confident in the historical accuracy of the New Testament. So let me just give you this illustration. Okay? Because some of you are already saying, well, if I can't see it, if I can't be there, I can't believe it. Okay? Let me give you an illustration. And you tell me if you would have faith in this. There's a large oval metal cylinder, and it has these things that go out to either side, And if it gets going fast enough, it'll take off the ground. And this thing can hold thousands and thousands of pounds of cargo. And it can fly at 500 miles an hour. You want to take a ride on it? This is not a trick question. Some of you are like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to get on this. Is this something you made? Okay, you've flown with me before. Why else? Why would you want to get on this thing or not? Come on, this is like audience participation here. You have faith in it? You've flown before? Oh, has it flown before? That would be a good question. Who's flying it? Okay. But would it fly? That's really the question. Would it fly? They do crash from time to time. Okay, an airplane, right? When you go to the airport and you see one of these ginormous hunks of metal with some wings, my wife, I'm going to tell a story on you because for the longest time, she would not want to get on an airplane, right? She would freak out. And I'm explaining to her the physics of what makes an airplane fly, low pressure, high pressure, and where you get the wings and it causes lift. And it just makes sense if you get it going fast enough, it can carry a whole bunch of weight. And she's like, it doesn't make sense to me at all. And at the end of the day, you got to choose, are you going to get on the airplane and go somewhere, or are you going to sit there and rationalize because in your mind you can't get over the fact that a 50,000-pound airplane with some jet engines on it can take off the ground and fly you to another country or something? You're going to have to choose, are you getting in the plane or not? Right? Because if you just look at that, if you don't live in 2022 and you go back to 1700, right? And you don't have a concept of a modern airplane, and you say, hey, get on this thing, it's going to take you to a foreign country, they'd be like, you're nuts. If they've never seen it fly before or anything, because it doesn't make sense, just sitting on a runway. Because it's huge, right? Everything about it in our minds would say, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But they figured it out how to make that thing take off. And so we always have a choice of where we're going to place our faith, right? It just, based upon the substance and the information that we have available to us, will we make that choice, okay? So, tools. Everyone good on tools? That's the foundation thing. We got to have the right tools. We're going to choose history. All right, now we are going to move on. Here we go. Who was Jesus? A recent study just showed that 40% of people don't even believe that Jesus was a historical person. That's crazy, all right? You know why? Because there's not one scholar in existence, when polled, that would agree with that survey of the public. Everybody agrees Jesus was a historical figure. Every scholar. It's universal, unless they're some crazy, person, but all the major universities, they went to Duke, they went to UNC, they went to all of them. Everyone agreed he was a historical person. Now, they very widely disagreed on who he was, right? But the fact that he existed is pretty clear, okay? So he existed. And he makes some claims. What I'm going to try to do is remove my own prejudice, which you never can because I've already told you, I'm all in on this Jesus thing. But he makes some claims, okay? And so we got to examine those claims and then use a historical approach to decide whether or not we have enough substance to put our faith in them, okay? So the first one, Jesus spoke with authority and he announced the kingdom of God. He claimed he was divine. And this is a big part of following Jesus. He makes that claim. Then Jesus declared authority over disease and sickness. And if you go and look these scriptures up, you're going to see the instances where he does this. But it's in your study notes too. So he declares authority. He heals people, right? He forgives their sin. He claims to be divine. Jesus declared authority over Jewish laws and Sabbath. That's a big no-no, if you didn't know, like in the Jewish world, because that's how you get killed. That's how you get executed. So he claims to be divine over that because he's over those things. Jesus declared authority to forgive sins. He says, which is it better to do? To forgive or to heal this person? He's talking about the lame man there. Heal this person or to forgive his sins. And so for your sake, I'm going to heal him as well. All right? It's a really cool story about the 4 friends who brought the one friend that could be healed. All right? Jesus claims to be God. All right? And those scriptures. So I want to just read Daniel 7 real quick here. Because this is a prophecy from the prophet Daniel, Old Testament, right? A lot of people say, where's Jesus in the Old Testament? Well, he's all over the place. Come take my Old Testament history survey, and I'll show you. But Jesus actually quotes Mark 14 back to Daniel 7:13 when he says this. Daniel says this. I saw in the night. Oh, this is ESV. Sorry. Let me go NIV. We learned about versions last week, right? You guys remember all that? Okay, I'm going to go NIV so we get thought and accuracy. Here we go. In verse 13, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. And Jesus quotes that over in Mark 14, 61 through 64, talking about himself. Okay, so he's reaching back. He's talking to the Jewish authorities. He's reaching back into those prophecies. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I spending time on this if everyone agrees that he really existed? Because the claim that Jesus is divine sets him apart from any other religious leader. Okay? And it also sets Christianity apart from any other religion. So, when Jesus claims to be divine, he's claiming to be God. Like God, the one who created all things. It's kind of a big deal, right? And so we have to decide in our own faith, is he really who he says he was? All right? So we have these sources that tell us about who Jesus was and about what the things he did. So we have, obviously, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The gospel accounts. They tell us about Jesus and all that he's done. But a lot of people don't know that there were Roman and Jewish historians that talked about Jesus. All right? So, example, Josephus, we talk about him a lot. He was a Jewish scholar and a scribe, and he wrote about all the things that happened during the time of Jesus. He was like the historian dude of the Jews, right? Wasn't a Christian, didn't believe that Jesus was necessarily divine, but he wrote about all the things Jesus did. And guess what? His accounts line up pretty close with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Usually if you're writing about someone that you don't agree with, you don't usually write the same story as what the guys that are going for him. I'm just saying, like, there's usually 2 perspectives. And then you have, I don't know how to say his name, but I've always told my life group leaders, you say it quick and you say it fast and you say it with confidence. All right? So Tacitus, that's how we're going to say it? 80, 56, and 120. He's a Roman historian. All right? He's not even Jewish. And he's writing about Jesus of Nazareth, about his miracles. He's writing about, they don't know how he did these things. He may be some kind of sorcerer. He's some kind of trickster. But he writes about, there's Jesus dude that went around teaching and healing people and doing all these things. He doesn't try to explain it. He just says, this is what happened, right? And then you have Pliny or Pliny the Younger, all right? He's also a Roman historian. And so he points out that this Jesus dude went around doing all these things, and then he got a bunch of people to worship God and specifically do it on Sundays. Like the Christians would get together the first day of the week, which was weird because the Jews didn't worship on Sundays, they worshiped on Saturdays. And he got them to go on Sundays, and it became a big thing. So you have the Christian sources that talk about Jesus and all the things he did. Then you have the non-Christian sources, and they don't know how to explain Jesus. They just write about the fact that he did these things, right? And so they even, in Pliny's, I believe I was reading, it was talking about Jesus as a sorcerer or some sort of magician, a traveling magician. They would go around performing these things and tricking all the people into worshiping him. But they couldn't explain the things that he did. So the fact they did credit to it, it's a big deal. All right. Recently, we have the Jesus Project. This is kind of a joke, but I don't know, anyone ever heard of the Jesus Project? Oh, okay, the two guys on staff, great. Okay, the Jesus Project, it may not even be the one you're thinking of. They set out to disprove Jesus because why not, right? If you get rid of Jesus, you get rid of having to follow any of his teaching. They set out to disprove, and this is a recent thing. I think in 2002-ish, they set out to disprove Jesus and Nazareth. Well, what happened was they found Nazareth really quick, which that was kind of a big deal when they actually excavated and found Nazareth. Like, if you've been to Israel, you can go to Nazareth, you can check it out, and like they point to places that were in Nazareth. So it kind of disproved their first point they were trying to do. Then the second point, disproving Jesus, when they tried to get scholars to sign on to this, they couldn't get any scholars to sign on to this. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar project to disprove this. And they couldn't get any traction. They ended up abandoning the entire project because lack of evidence to support their case. That's officially what they said on their website. And this was going to be a liberal movement that was going to be in the colleges and all this stuff, the Jesus Project, to disprove Christianity. Why? Because they didn't want to necessarily put their faith in this. But as we've pointed out, both historical, archaeological evidence from Christian, Jewish, Roman sources leave very room for argument when it comes to the existence of Jesus.